I have wanted to return to Timor-Leste for a while, to see what had become of the country, to visit and document the riches of East Timor, its people, geography and culture, and to have a little adventure along the way. Being over 20 years since I served in East Timor under the United Nations, I was keen to return to experience firsthand the difference our military commitment helped make to the nation, and support the country's efforts in establishing a tourism industry. The project itself was adventurous, authentic and a little audacious. All the things I aim to be and share with others. This is the story of my return to Timor-Leste and the experience I had in August and September 2022.
Okay. Yeah.
Returning to East Timor, I was fortunate to be accompanied by Ben Horton, a leadership coach and the presenter of the Eagle Standard podcast. Ben is an all-round good bloke, and like me, a veteran of the Australian Army, serving over 18 years and finishing as a Squadron Sergeant Major of a cavalry unit. Ben deployed to East Timor on 2 occasions, the first being in 1999, when he was the driver of an M113 armoured personnel carrier. After overnighting in Darwin, things went pretty smoothly getting into Dili. Our flights on Air North were good, and arrival in Timor-Leste was actually one of the best experiences I've ever had arriving in a foreign country. $30 visa on arrival, and 3 small forms later, immigration, a health declaration and a customs declaration, and we were through the airport and out, into an old beat-up taxi and on our way to town. Our plan from here was pretty simple. Check into our hotel, pick up our motorbikes, and get ready for tomorrow. For the next 10 days, we would be riding around the country. We only really had 3 objectives: to take a few photos, to meet some real, genuine Timorese people, and to visit some of the places where we had served over 20 years ago. For me, climbing Timor-Leste's highest mountain would be a bonus. But like any unscripted, unrehearsed adventure, things don't always go to plan. But that's okay. It'd be boring if it did. Enter Alfonso. Before leaving Australia, I'd only organised 3 things: flights and travel insurance, hotels for the first 2 nights, and our transport around the country. And while I had confidence in the first 2, the motorbikes I wasn't so sure about. Researching from Australia, I'd come across a Facebook page called Timor Motorbike Rentals and Tours. And that person had put me in contact with Alfonso. For $35 a day each, Alfonso could supply us with 2 KLX 150 motorbikes. The bikes weren't as big as I originally wanted, but it didn't seem like in Dili I had much of a choice. There just weren't bigger bikes for rental. So the KLX 150s it was. Alfonso was good. He even organised a trip to the workshops for the next day so that we could get the bikes checked out and made sure they were good to go for our trip around Timor. And I certainly don't think Alfonso's to blame when that night we ran out of fuel. I can actually distinctly remember Alfonso saying, "Hey, your bike, Ben, doesn't have much fuel in it." But I'll let Ben tell that story. I would like to take a moment, however, to highlight the dangers and risks of riding motorbikes in foreign countries. I'm pretty comfortable. I've ridden bikes in Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia and Mongolia. But if you've got no experience at all, it's probably a good idea to get a friend who's done it before to show you the ropes. Or someone like Alfonso that can go for a few rides with you, show you how to negotiate the traffic. They don't always follow road rules like they do here in Australia. And many Australians been banged up without insurance overseas. It's important that you have travel insurance that covers motorbike riding, and for that you'll need an international driver's licence and an open motorbike licence in the country you come from. For Ben and I, day 1 of our Timor-Leste experience went pretty smoothly, with only one small hiccup being the empty fuel tank. We finished up the day watching the sunset over the Dili port, where we'd both arrived into Timor-Leste over 20 years ago. Dinner was at a beachside restaurant east of Dili towards the Jesus statue, and then it was an early night back at the hotel, prepping our gear for the next day. We were both looking forward to hitting the road on the bikes. So we're in Timor-Leste. Spent the night in Dili last night, stayed at the Hotel Timor behind me, and to be honest, better than expected. It's clean, not too expensive, and it's just a generally good hotel. Restaurant in the foyer, food's good, coffee shop, and it's got banks and everything like that. We're right outside the port. A lot of blokes might remember it. I'll go over and film it in a second. The main gates of the port where a lot of the boats arrive. I myself, when I came to Timor with the army 21 years ago, in 2001 came over on the big catamaran that they had, so I would have disembarked here somewhere, I reckon myself. The morning of day 2, Ben and I were both pretty eager to get going. You could feel that little bit of excitement in the air that you get just before you set out on a good adventure. We were both up early, and after a few photos around the front of the hotel and the port area, we were back on the motorbikes and heading down to the workshops to make sure they were 100% before the ride. Now, there might be a few people watching the video thinking to themselves that the bike should be good to go when you collect them from the hire company. But there's 2 really good reasons why I think it's a good idea and a great opportunity if you get the chance to take the bikes down to a workshop with a good mechanic and have them checked out while you're present. And the first is pretty obvious. It's not going to do you any good at all blaming the hire company when you break down miles from nowhere out on the side of the mountain or some remote track. You need to take responsibility for your own gear and check it. Make sure it's good to go. And on this occasion, it paid off. Not only did I get my brakes checked and my chain tightened, but Alfonso was happy to put a brand new back tyre on the bike so that it was in even better condition for the ride. And after the mechanic took a good close look at it, he let us know that one of the front fork seals had gone, so he fixed that up as well. The other reason why I'm happy to head down to the mechanics for an hour and have my bike checked is that you get to meet some more local Timorese people, see them working and living in their own environments. Even though these mechanics didn't have the flash workshops you see in Australia, it was obvious from the get-go how good they were at their job, how proficient they were at changing out parts and making sure the bike was running well. For me, as someone who's had an interest in mechanics since I was quite young, visiting the workshops was one of the highlights of the trip. Now that we had the bikes 100% good to go, we headed back to the hotel to grab the rest of our gear. We topped up with fuel on the way and grabbed some local SIM cards so that we had mobile coverage around East Timor for the trip. We were now ready. The wait was over. We were hitting the road, on our way from Dili to Balibo. Dili to Batagade was a great ride. There are a few big potholes in the road that you got to keep an eye out for, but for the most part, she was bitumen all the way. We had a few stops to chill out and take photos, but some of the highlights of the ride was our lunch stop at Luis, where we knocked back a beer and had some prawn crackers, and our stop at Ida Belaton, where we wanted to check out where the old Australian base was from the early 2000s. It was pretty cool to see that not only was it still there and the remnants of all the HESCO barriers still in place, but the Timorese military now using it as a base of their own. One of the most interesting things that Ben and I think we came across along the ride was what appeared at first glance to be some sort of old mining camp, but on closer inspection we found the local Timorese people extracting salt from seawater. Watching the locals here, we were again reminded, as you often are in developing nations, how tough some people have to do it, how hard they work, just to keep a roof over their head and put food on the table. But for Ben and I in Batagade, we could see the day starting to get away from us, and we still had to get up the hill to Balibo without knowing what the road was going to be like. So we didn't hang around there too long, we got going again. It wasn't really overly emotional for me arriving back in Balibo, and I'm not sure nostalgia's the right word, but it's a funny feeling you get returning to a place that you haven't been to for over 20 years, but somewhere you actually lived. To look around and see if your brain can pick up the differences. In a lot of ways, after our first full day in Timor-Leste, it didn't feel like the infrastructure in the country had changed a lot. The buildings generally seemed to be the same, and the roads in the same condition. The road from Batagade up to Balibo, still with a few rough dirt spots. The area where I felt there was a big difference though was the people. In 2001, when I was in East Timor, I probably, understandably, felt a bit like a tradesman, called in to give someone a hand, do them a favour and fix something up. Now, returning after 21 years, it certainly felt like the Timorese people could take care of themselves, and I was just fortunate to be a guest in their country. After all the hardships they've faced in their recent history, the Timorese people are now hugely patriotic about their country. It's great to be visiting, and it's great to be back in Balibo to see how the place has changed.